So the education in the Arab world countries are, taking place in the context of social variables and discourses with critical throughout the analysis. So if we look at the Arab world, we're still stuck to the teacher-centered classroom, especially in, very rigid, centered around the curriculum, and not really an interactive session, especially in science and math, unfortunately. And also in Kuwait, the Assessment and Measurement Center at Kuwait University, when we obtained the results and we've compared the results of the aptitude test, which is a test for student enrollment in the university, we've noticed the decline between the huge gap between girls and boys in the results in chemistry and in math, and also in language arts, but we were focusing mostly on math and science. We've also noticed that male students, Kuwaiti male students attending private sector, they've scored higher than Kuwaiti male students in public school sector. Now, we've also looked at another dimension, which is the international trend of or what they call the TEMS study. It's an international based school, evaluation for math and science. And we've noticed the huge gap between the male and female, and also the score in general of our country compared the investment in how much we pay on education per capita, it's very low. So what happened is that we scored one of the lowest means in TEMS study. Public school are separated by gender by law, in public school only, but private schools can be gender mixed. And also when we compared the school environment, when we did the school visits, we've noticed that the boys' campuses are always, not as organized and not as functional as the girls' campuses. And when we also looked at the percentage of math and science teacher, most they come from unqualified or low income countries from the region, and they are mostly unqualified. And if they are qualified, they tend to move to private sector because it's better for them. So what's left are the most vulnerable teachers for the most disadvantaged students. So one of the quotes that I would like to share with you, the Kuwaiti education system has been suffering from a phenomenon called the missing boys. So we have the issue, it is noticeable, not only in Kuwait, but because our case here is Kuwait, but mostly the GCC countries, the Gulf area countries, we have this phenomenon, both in terms of enrollment and achievement. The education gap between men and women is serious, and it concerns with, not only the school level, but also extends to the labor market. We have now the medical school in Kuwait and even abroad. We have higher percentage of female physicians than male, which is, from a Western perspective, it could be like, wow, this is women empowerment. But again, later on, I will elaborate why this is an issue that concerns us as women, that we need also men to be represented equally. So the rationale of the study, the investigation was about boys disadvantaged is needed because Kuwaiti students are not living in poverty. We're not poor people. They have good income. They live in respected houses. They have the privileged lifestyle that enable them to be successful. They're not forced to drop out to find a job or support their parents. Also, it is an interesting case because to explore since the system is centralized, everything gets split in half between the boys' campus and the girls' campus. We get free books, we get free utensils in the schools, we have well-equipped labs, we have same assessment system because it's centralized. We wanted to speculate and see the assumptions may revolve around two main factors, which is the cultural background and the influence on it, on the school society and the school context, which is, we mostly focus on teacher efficiency. So exploring all of these things will lead to three more investigations. We focused on exploring current situation of the boys at schools. We reviewed the policies and programmatic interventions at national level. We also tried to list and provide policy approaches that can be identified and promising to support boys in school. So, our conceptual framework was on Maslow's hierarchies need. Let me just move this a little bit so you can see it. And also the SDG for the quality of education, because it also involved, empowerment for and equality among students. So we wanted to ensure the inclusive of equitable equality, and we also wanted to see the school environment and visit those schools and have insight and in-depth look and assure that are these needs, the psychological needs, are being met in schools or not. Later on, we have noticed, sorry, did I miss something? Yeah, so in terms of, the methodology, we actually had permission from the Ministry of Education to visit schools. We visited almost 14 to 15 schools between public and private. And in public, we were, had the chance to visit both gender. But my case here in this paper, I only focused on presenting the boys' atmosphere and how they are being, or learning science and math in those classrooms. So the school administration in public school, they lack the autonomy. So not at a teacher level, it's also at the management level. So the school managers or the school principals, they say, we just get everything from the ministry and we have to obey and take the command as it is, whereas we sometimes cannot fit those narrow vision of what is applicable in some schools in some areas, and for example, outer areas in Kuwait where they have higher population and they need more intervention from different different supports such as social and psychological support. The lack of teacher equality and the problem with teachers, we suffer from what we call it the missing Kuwaiti teachers. The Kuwaiti teachers usually, or the students who get enrolled in colleges of education, mostly women. and this phenomena is not only in Kuwait, but it's internationally recognized. However, when we go to more specifically to science and math at a higher or let's say high school level, we'll see even the numbers will be dropped. So, for example, I'll give you a direct number from the statistical perspective. We only have 9 Kuwaiti male teachers teaching in Kuwaiti school, whereas we have 250 non-Kuwaiti teachers. So you cannot even, it's not a minority, the number cannot be even recognized compared to the non-Kuwaitis. And those non-Kuwaitis usually come from Jordan and Egypt, and some of them where we rarely have cases from Syria. So those teachers who are coming, they come from a lower income and they don't have any intensive in the system, and they get way lower than the Kuwaiti teachers. And another issue and another factor why Kuwaitis are not in the math and the science and the core subject classes teaching, because Kuwaiti teachers are paid the same, whether you are a physical teacher or art or physics. So if you're gonna compare yourself in the future, why do I have to give myself a headache teaching physics and everybody would chase me while I can, do some exercise and get the same amount of money? So we did not do anything to solve the problem. We made it even more complicated by putting the equality line for the teachers, and we caused the imbalance in the system. Teachers and community, tradition versus civic acts. We come from the system of Kuwait. And we cannot neglect that we have tribes, and the tribal system praise men who are not obeying laws, praise men who are, acting, the powerful, the violence attitude, and this is part of the heritage, and they would say poetry about it. So asking students to behave and be in line and and do the civic practices is not part of their home culture. So they don't come with a prepared home culture, yet the school does not really care because they are only central, or they are structured in a way just to deliver and make sure that they are delivering the curriculum. So at the end of the day, they will test them on this rigid, solid curriculum. Again, equality versus equity. So we cannot create the change if we're just gonna make things equal. Given the fact that the same houses, the same school and parent community sending those boys to school, they are sending their own girls too. However, girls tend to obey and listen because by culture, women are supposed to listen and be obedient to anything they receive from the outside, while the boy needs to be totally the opposite. So coming from that culture, and I'm talking about a population here in Kuwait, I'm talking about public school that almost 500,000 child go to a public school versus I'm talking about a number of Kuwaiti citizens. I'm not talking about the whole population of Kuwaitis and non-Kuwaitis. Now, comparing those 500,000 to, let's say, 20 to maybe 50,000 students going to private schools. So we can see the big gap and the difference, and now we're creating another dimension, which is, the inequality among the same population. So looking at, our ending it with the, so I only have 5 minutes. We are seeing those gender gap in the education system. It's hidden. When you go as a researcher, for example, you see that they are trying to fit themselves with the sustainable development goal by saying we are equal, we are providing the same, curriculum, we're providing teachers, we're providing the tools, but they don't really care about the quality, or they don't really look into the system that we are omitting the variables of cultures, and you cannot create a change unless if you can break the cycle of the culture and try to fix it within the different school environment, and have more intervention from NGOs, non-governmental organization, seeking the help from the Ministry of Social Affairs to make the difference. So, the gender gap is not as obvious as mixed in the private sector. The opportunities are the same. The social economic status for parents who can provide and pay the tuition for children versus those who cannot provide and go to public sector are not getting the same opportunities. Yet this number is affecting our labor market by creating, less competent male, and yet this will affect us as women in our culture by enabling us from more rights. Those who graduate from public school can reach in the system. They can reach through different programs, but with the same mentality. We did not really change them. We just, enabled them to enter the civic system with the tribal mentality. So I hope I
Oh yeah, we still have
We still have 1 minute.
2 minutes. Yeah, you
2
have.
minutes? Okay, good. So this is pretty much, and again, we have less scientists, and we have more women in science, but yet who's making the final decision and making the policies are those who were not competent in school, but yet they are enabled to reach higher level of stakeholder. Thank you.
Any questions?